clear that throughout the 2020 election campaign and up to now, liberals were and still are banking on this return to normal. So first, it's a return to normal from Trump, now a return to normal after the pandemic. But I think it's clear to us that like there is no returning to this mythical normal. Like even if COVID is eliminated, even if there's a guarantee Trump is not running in 2024, the fundamental contradictions and inequalities in our society are not going away. I think in the future, we're still going to see the growth of the far right and the far left. So how do you think liberals will respond as it becomes more and more clear that there is no going back to normal? Or maybe it won't be clear to them at all. But how are they going to respond as, there is this no going back to brunch, going back to normal in the next few years?
In terms of how liberal voters respond, I'm at least somewhat optimistic. I think it's somewhat plausible that there actually will be, that they really will. I mean, we saw in 2016 and in 2020, because of Bernie Sanders, two very nearly successful revolts against the Democratic Party leadership, which were not anticipated. And even after 2016, Sanders was not treated as a serious contender in 2020 by establishment liberals. And he came very, very close to winning the Democratic nomination, I think, on both occasions. So I'm very critical of the Democratic leadership class and of the liberal media and of liberal elites, but I am I think less cynical perhaps and of liberal voters themselves. I think that often they're conditioned perhaps in some of these ways we've been discussing to kind of give Democrats a blank check, and they're taught that that's what the constructive thing to do is. But I think that it's going to be harder and harder to sustain that. In terms of how elites themselves will operate, I suspect that they will continue along the same path and harden in many of the same things that they're doing now. I think that the current moment is a very strange interregnum period. One thing I think you can say about Biden is in kind of the early Biden era, I think it has disappointed or at least failed to fulfill a lot of its kind of stated mandate, a lot of the sort of legislative priorities that it ostensibly has. I don't think are going to be realized. I don't think there was ever a serious attempt, for example, to pursue the public option, which was Biden's supposedly Senate. That was gonna cruise through the Senate, unlike Medicare for All, et cetera. But Bidenism has been very successful, at least for a few months, until this crack up over Afghanistan. Anyway, it's been very successful in, albeit somewhat artificially, restoring a kind of cultural consensus that does feel very reminiscent of 2012, say, or something like that, where all of a sudden, this is purely anecdotal, and I'm being a little facetious here, but all of a sudden in kind of February, March of 2021, it felt like political Twitter had gone back to, discourse cycles about, whether the latest Marvel movie was problematic or whatever. It felt like that's right. I mean, it felt like the stakes were lower. It was, is a real kind of back to brunch moment. And at the same time, of course, as we've talked about, if you were to read kind of highbrow and middlebrow sort of liberal magazines and things like that, there was this narrative, these long reads about the New Deal and all that kind of stuff, and so there was a really kind of, as I say, albeit artificial, kind of complacency that I think was very seductive, and which a lot of people were really keen to embrace. That's kind of fractured over Afghanistan, and I suspect as we get closer to the midterms, it'll fracture some more. But as to what happens when it does fracture, I think all hell's going to break loose. We'll have to see. I think Trump is absolutely going to run again in 2024. It seems. I mean, I would be very surprised if he didn't, and I don't think the Republican Party is even equipped anymore to be fronted by anyone besides Donald Trump. So when that happens, boy, it's anyone's guess. It's not going to be pretty.
So Luke, I actually have a bonus question for you because we haven't gotten a chance to talk about movies yet. What do you think is a really good movie about American liberalism?
Oh boy. Well,
no, I'm just kidding. Maybe.
any number. I mean, any number of movies that we've done on my podcast. But let me tell you about a movie that's near and dear to my heart. Ironically, the very first episode of my podcast, which originally was a sort of, celebratory, but I suppose looking back critically at some of Michael Moore's films, some of which hold up wonderfully. Thanks for the promo on screen there. But there's a little known Michael Moore film called Slacker Uprising, and I love Michael. I'm not knocking him here, but that film is really an incredible document of liberalism in 2004 when John Kerry was the Democratic nominee. Michael Moore had this whole kind of tour where it was a get out the vote tour for John Kerry, but I don't think he actually could bring himself to endorse John Kerry for until a few days before the actual election. So you get these big rallies that have all this rhetoric against the war and stuff like that, but are kind of crypto get out the vote rallies for Democrats. And what Moore was doing, I think, was was well intentioned, and obviously he was hoping to make a movie about how he helped get John Kerry elected, which isn't the movie he was able to make. So I don't think the movie ended up being in theaters. But that film, which I think. We've done 2 episodes of it on my podcast. As I said, it's very near and dear to my heart. But I think that film really sums up a lot of the contradictions we've been talking about. Where on the one hand, there's a kind of rhetoric, at least, of radicalism, and in Moore's case, I think some genuine commitment to it as well. But then on the other hand, often liberal voters especially are kind of conditioned to be very conservative in how they think and how they behave. So there's all kinds of films I could have given you to answer that question. I've discovered a whole new vistas of cringe through doing my podcast. But that would certainly be one of them. Slacker Uprising. Check it out, folks.
If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.